At this point, Nicholas Parsons would say, as the minute waltz fades away, for those that have been listening online, I can say as the bells of St Peter Mancroft, Norwich, fade away. It's my huge pleasure to welcome our many listeners, not only in this country but around the world, but also to welcome the exciting, humorous and talented David House. Good afternoon, David. Those in the audience won't have heard, but streaming online was the ringing that the college youths did for their winning test piece at the 2015 National 12-Hour competition at St Peter Mancroft. You rang in Norwich for a number of years, so your knowledge of the bells was a real asset to the band.
Norwich was a very exciting place for me. I moved there to go to university. I'd spent the previous 5 years learning to ring in Southampton. But I've never lived away from home before. And East Anglia somehow has a bit of magic. You're a Wisbech man, if I remember rightly. So it's one of those places where you know you can say to somebody, drop in when you're passing, and no, they won't. And I found it quite exciting. I knew, of course, about the great history of ringing in Norwich, and indeed competition with London, and the big debate about the first peal, the first true peal. But Mancroft was exciting, and of course, what it did, among many other things, was bring me into contact with the pipe dynasty very quickly. First Jim and his donkey, which much is to be told, and then very quickly George. George sort of kept watch on the boundaries of East Anglia and made sure that he knew everybody that was living or breathing in it that could catch a sally. And it wasn't very long before George got in touch. And then, of course, later Rod and the younger members of the family. But a great time. Norwich itself, the local band when I arrived, I mean, I was 18 and a bit more than a bit bumptious, I'm sure. There were a lot of old boys there with funny names. There was Nolan Golden and Bert Gogol. They were lovely people. They couldn't ring for toffee, most of them. And just before I got there, a number of people had moved in, a younger generation. Firstly, Dr. David Hyton, very much a long-time member of this society, of course, had come back from university, and then the two Cupids had both moved from Wakefield, David and Martin. So there was a nucleus of a slightly younger band waiting around. David Hyton was the person who sort of, he's a midget. He really was very short, but he took on these mighty chaps. And we began actually to build a band, which over the next 7 or 8 years I think did reasonably well. Nothing like the heights that Norwich has now reached, because of course those people who can't afford to move to the West Country and retire move to East Anglia. And there are lots of greatly talented ringers now living in and around Norwich, and it's a delight to see all they've achieved.
Excellent. I believe you knew Chris Kiffin played quite a significant part in your early ringing.
Yes, he did. And I'm only here today because he's not, which is a bit of a downer, isn't it? George Pipe never made it here, nor did Chris, so I hope I make it to the next meeting. It does remind me of the days when Rodney Meadows had passed away the night after, we think, going to one of the past masters' dinners at the Gay Hussar. And I was elected to succeed him as trustee. And the Gay Hussar dinner came around. We used to have a lovely little room at the top with a circular table and lots of limericks and disgusting liqueurs. So as we got up to this room and I stood there, I was the newbie. All the others said, "That's your chair." But I'm still here. But Chris, yes, I mean, I came to ringing through being a member of the choir at Bitton Park. When the bells were installed, I was 11, did nothing of ringing. The vicar at the time decided that what Bitton Park needed was a ring of bells, and the initial 8 were created. Many of you will remember those 2 straight lines of ropes, because the vicar was very sensitive about the quality of the stained glass, and rightly so. So I was in the choir, and I remember the dedication service very well. I mean, I'd never seen ringing or anything. And we had lots of pomp and ceremony. Douglas Hughes was there, handing over the bells in person almost. And then suddenly the University of Southampton Guild, who were the opening band, started ringing, and I saw these Sallys lying around. I was totally hooked. And my voice broke within a year or so, and the route then became go to the tower. Well, brand new ring of 8, and the Kippin family senior took very seriously their obligation in Southampton to come and help. So Charles and Jessie used to turn up, and as long as you kept on the right side of Charles, you learned quite a lot. Very good of them. They used to bring Chris along. Chris actually had no interest at all initially. I mean, he would bring a comic to read and do all he could actually to wriggle away, because he didn't want his father being in charge all the time. But we became friends very quickly, not least because we realised we were in the same school time. We both at King Edward Southampton, and within a year, I suppose, I'd been lined up to read my first bill, conducted by Chris, and that was back in 1959, and we're still going. Yes.
And talking about ringing, you can be very modest at times, but you have rung in some quite groundbreaking stuff.
Well, I mean, the things move on, don't they? You think you're doing all right for a few minutes, and then people overtake you. And I'm very happy that they do, really. I mean, I used to, my real youth, fancy myself as a bit of a tenor ringer. And I rang, one or two things like Manchester Town Hall to Splice and Dublin and things. Then Mark Regan came along and spoiled it all. I used to be able to conduct a bit. Then others came along, and I mean, yeah, there are moments. So I would pick out some things perhaps later on that I do look back on with great pleasure. But it's those early days in Southampton which, of course, provided the foundation for me. What was going on at the time was that Charles Kippin was still pretty much in his prime, and if you were brave enough, and I was daft enough, you would go along to the St Michael's Southampton practice, where they were ringing 8 Splice Surprise Royal on a practice night. Some funny methods, mind, Winchester and Warwickshire, but London and Bristol included. And you learnt the hard way. Chris didn't actually much fancy that because it was Daddy in charge. So Chris used to go off with a band of young duffers, often signing me up, and ring peals of Bob Major on pleasant days like Kingsbury and Warminster and Bradford on Avon. I'm sure we rang them very badly, but they're all there in the book still. So we had a sort of bifurcation. I was very happy to learn a lot from the older colleges and others. Charles Kippin, Roger Savary, who was a great friend and protege, or protector of mine. But also actually to go out with Chris and do things the hard way. He wasn't quite as successful in those days as he later became. I remember one year when I think we went for a appeal every week for 6 months, and he miscalled every bloody one. But he learned. My goodness me, that instinct was there. And of course, the musicality, which was deeply buried in him, was absolutely fantastic.
And so you were talking about how strong ringing was in Southampton. When did you move to Brighton? What was ringing like there when you arrived?
I remember that I turned up in the ringing 4 on a Sunday evening. That was so I had 7 or 8 years in Southampton until I was 18. Norwich from 18 until when was 1972, I suppose. So 24, 26, and then I went to Brighton, which for 2 years, but I'm still there. And Brighton, again, things come and go, don't they? We've all experienced it. Albert Bond, a long-standing college youth, was in charge. Probably stayed too long. Charming man. Very open to innovation. But there were, seeds that you could actually pluck out. There were the Corley brothers, still active with us all. Chris Kipling called his first people. I mean, he learnt to handle a little before we went there, but hadn't rung much. And so we managed to actually build a band that, we could ring London Royal on a practice night. I'm lucky now if we ring, Yorkshire on a monthly basis, but these things do go in cycles. It was always a great pleasure to give people a chance. Sometimes it's been just somebody who could do a bit of conducting does help. I mean, that's what happened in Norwich, I think. I got signed up to call things, and I don't pretend to have been very good, but it just makes the difference every now and then. You have to stop and start again. And the same, I think, in Brighton.
I'm just thinking back, you mentioned earlier about disgusting liqueurs. You're much better known for a fine taste in wine, but the College is very much a beer drinking society. How did you develop your fine taste in wine?
Oh, I'm not sure how it wouldn't say it's that fine. Nearly anything if anybody buys it for. No, I've never wanted to drink lots of beer. I mean, I get full and probably tell you so. Wine was, I think, mainly visits to France and the areas that we've got to know and love. Visits to California, which is one of my favourite wine-making areas, Napa and Sonoma. And lots of tuition from people like John Hughes and Phil Rogers.
A fine set of past secretaries you were talking about. Yeah. And obviously you preceded me as secretary. Are there any sort of memories of your time as secretary that stand out?
Well, I always think I had it easy compared with you, Simon, and I say that with genuine admiration. You've had bigger issues to deal with, like the meeting place and so on. My memory, I suppose, is firm friendships forged. And but I'd been a member for 50 years before I became secretary, so there were lots of connections there. What was particularly pleasing was, I suppose, renewing contacts, particularly with overseas members. You and I were both in Washington for the 50th anniversary of the Bells, for example, weren't we? And we were there last week as well, so that was a real pleasure. I think, I claim no great innovations. We had to move the dinner once or twice, and you know what that's like. It won't be long before we do it again. I suppose one of the things I did try to do, and you've followed it, was just to be a little bit more free with information after meetings. We actually had a moment where David Bleeby from Adelaide said, "It was all right for you chaps. All we ever hear down there in the deep south is when somebody's died." We've always been cautious about being too open with our information, but it seemed to me that we could actually say a bit more after meetings, and that seemed to have gone well down at the time, and you've on the whole kept that up. No, I suppose it's actually 50 years ago this month I was elected master of the college youths. So here we are again. I suppose the big issue that sticks in my mind, well, I was the dumbo that came forward and proposed the change in Rule 1, to the deletion of the male. And I'm very pleased with what I did. 25 years on, who could have thought that it was the right thing to have? It did test a few friendships at the time, and when I understood that there were strong feelings. As it happens, I'm also part of an all-male club at the moment, which goes through the same process. So you can imagine what side I'm on and how hard it's being.
Yes, and sort of almost coming full circle to where we started, you had an enormous involvement in the national 12-bell competition. Yeah, well,
it started, of course, the year I was master, as it happened, as a society, in the sense it wasn't then the Taylor Trophy. The first competition was Redcliffe, and we returned there this year, of course. It was a travesty. We clearly won the contest. What made it worse was Leicester were adjudged to have been the winners. Andrew Wilby ran for Leicester, but wanted to lift back to London in Jim Pryor's car. And, he's not here as he's downstairs. I just saw him checking in. He was very difficult to deal with. But yes, in the days when we did try to judge things by listening, I did about 18 or 19 finals and eliminators. Often criticised, of course, as judges would always be. And I think I'm certainly a believer now that Hawker adds some strength to the information that people have. Although it does get to the point, I think, where if Hawker scores individual ringers, you might just well let the Brummies have their own competition and see who comes second to Mark Eccleston. But yeah, the competition I think was fantastic. It started off with only 5 teams. The Cumberlands refused to enter because they thought it was bad in principle at the time, I recall, in that first year. It took off very quickly, and I think Paul Taylor donating the trophy and making a thing of it really helped. And we've seen upwards of 20 teams entering in good years. Some only once, and we'll see. I can also claim that every time the colleges have won, I've been involved. I've either been ringing, which is a couple of times, or I've been chief judge. I don't think the colleges have won it in any other fashion. Up to you,
And I think perhaps in the past, some of the comments delivered to teams have been more descriptive than.
Well, I did say it. I've tried for years to pretend I didn't. Most people know the story. It was the third contest, I think. It was the first time I was judging at Southwark, and the London County entered. It was simple step and sings, and I recall very clearly the final course was 2 single 30, single 15. And clearly what had happened in that is that somebody had made a bob, somebody had made a single, and they couldn't agree, and it descended into a big fire-up until magically rounds came up. We counted very carefully. It was the right number of rows. Apparently I said something like, Team G might have been better off playing tiddlywinks. And I can even now hear Chris's father saying, "What's he saying? What's he saying?" And Olive saying, "You're a very naughty boy, David Harris." After which I think judges have given better advice about formulating their comments. And of course we did have the year, didn't we, when the Brummies hid microphones in the ringing chamber without permission, which I suppose would always be breaking the law these days, wouldn't it? Privacy. That was quite amusing. Yeah.
Yes. And you sort of alluded, you were talking about ringing achievements earlier, and you said you'd come back to some of those. So which ones stick in your mind?
Well, life's got much more complicated. Now, what sticks to my mind, I suppose, some of the deals with Tony. I mean, I've been lucky that in terms of the society, I was part of the band called the Flying Circus. 1 or 2 more here were. Over 100 peals. And then Tony's first Saturday band started in 1995 and went on for 20 years. And much of what we achieved there was actually brilliant stuff at the time. We now see that the very clever Graham Bradshaw is trying to eclipse all with. So life does move on, but I suppose one of the things that sticks in my mind particularly was a couple of deals where I spliced on 16 on the Pipe Classics plan. So all 15 part first of all, then all 16 bells in, which was quite stunning really. And I've never thought I would take to 16 bell ringing. I still think I won't in a general sense, but peals of Bristol 16 just go on forever and bore me to tears. But that clever musical construction, and I don't know whether Tony claims the credit or David Pipe or what, but it was very clever stuff. And it was mesmerisingly beautiful. In another direction, some of the silent peals, I think, there's nothing better is there, than a good peal rung properly silent and non-conducted. You've been in some of these. I mean, we rang High Classic Maximus silent, we rang Rabs silent, we rang a 10,000 of Rigel silent. It wasn't as hard as it sounds, just concentration. But so those have been particularly good. I think peals in special places help. I mean, most of us here, they don't get the chance much to ring at St Paul's. Rather treasure it when we do. I mean, I've been lucky enough to call both a peal of 6 and a peal of Maximus there, about 40 years apart. And get my name on the wall at last, so along with Swans.
You called the 11,000 at Bow, didn't
Oh yes, yes, it was, yeah. And then we went to Rotherham, I think, around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes. Don't ask me why. Then there was the long thing at Southwark. How long was that? The big ring at Southwark, 12,675 was it? And then there was the 13,000 we ran at Cripplegate. Yeah, and that's terrifying to think of, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've got long lengths for specialists sitting here. I mean, 10 in a day. Only if the day's got 25 hours, mind, I noticed.
Excellent. I was wondering if anyone had any questions they wanted to ask David.
If I may,
Or
Dave,
comments,
you've done an awful lot of composing and conducting in Stedman, cages and sinks. Perhaps what sparked your interest in Stedman and how you sort of followed on through that?
Yes, it's just a variety that is achievable in Stedman, which is not easily achievable anywhere else. And I've been lucky enough to spend time in charge of a couple of 10 bell towers and a 12 bell tower. So lots of this starts with service touches and a bit, one hopes originality. And I do take some credit for that. I mean, I noticed even Mark Eccleston took some of my stuff away in his early days. And Rob Pike would never ring Stedman and had no interest at all until I pushed him up a bit. And then, of course, you find your composition published as arranged by Roddy Pike, which he did do very well. But it starts, I think, from the short touch idea, but then actually looking at what you can do in turning courses. And I've loved it, yeah.
That's one who's benefited from it.
Yes, yeah.
Any other questions for David?
Well, sorry, another one from me, but talking about notable peals, I think one that I think does stand out in my memory, when you rang the tenor to a peal of Redcliffe in Bristol, which I thought was at the time was a very, very good peal.
Yes.
I think that was a top class achievement on your part.
It's all on tape too.
Yes.
All on the Michael Morton machine somewhere. I mean, Paul Massey seems to have inherited all these things. My great fear is that he's going to publish it and then we'll realise it wasn't as good as we thought it was.
You were mentioning about being a tenor, tenoring in the early days. What's the heaviest tenor you've run?
Well, Redcliffe probably. Okay. To appeal, yes. Well, St Paul's. I mean, I do remember the year I was master, so it was 1975, and appeals at St Paul's were very rare, and outsiders were very rarely invited at that time. I had the phone call from John Chilcott saying we'd like you to come and call appeal at St Paul's. Like to bring Londinium, which was the big in thing at the time, London on 12, gosh. Then he said, I'm pretty sure you could ring the tenor alone if but I'm not going to let you try, because it's not fair to everybody else. So I'm going to give you my brother, Mike, and he'll be on the bottom end. So that's what we rang. And then, of course, I rang the other end of that with, it was before the 350th anniversary dinner, with Mr. Wilby on top, and the struggle there was agreeing on the blue line of Cambridge.
That's the best tenor I've ever heard of.
Yeah, he's good.
Yeah. Excellent. Anybody else got any comments or questions?
What interests you outside of bellringing, if anything?
Music of most sorts. Had one very pleasant evening in Climbbourne this week. Met Phil and Gwen there, so past Secretary Sal still active. That's the main interest, I suspect. Tourism, travel and tourism. We just, as I say, spent this very good 2 weeks in Washington and New York doing some ringing. A great friendship with the American collegians. I mean, I must say, it's brilliant to go back. But also, pleasure to see him here. Yeah. And fine wine, apparently. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Andrew.
Following on from that fine wine comment, have you got any holiday for wine before, or?
Oh, most of our trips to California have been wine related. I mean, Napa and Sonoma, absolutely, you land in the vineyards as soon as you get out the car, and it's wonderful. France is a bit more varied. I mean, I'm quite happy to see the odd castle or river before I actually get to the wine. But yeah, and Spain, of course, as you say. I mean, we've had a lovely week in Seville. Plenty of nice things there. Yeah.
Excellent. Any other questions?
David, I wonder whether you might talk a bit about your working life.
We've got. Yeah. Well, it's a very humble working life, John, as you know.
Far from it.
Fundamentally, I spent 37 years at the University of Brighton. The last 20 of those was Deputy Vice Chancellor, which is a very posh-sounding name for doing everything that nobody else wanted to do. But it did involve fundamentally planning of a university, negotiating with the government over funding and student numbers, and lots of professional bodies, or irritating people like lawyers, John, that come in and tell you what they want to do to teach. Then the chemists would come next week, and so on. And it was a very full-on working life. I mean, I suppose there was a vice-chancellor who was the boss, and I was lucky to serve with a couple of brilliant people. Their job was mainly outwardly focused, so my job was actually running the inside machine. Hugely satisfying, but I do remember the day I retired, suddenly feeling I don't have to worry anymore. I mean, every single day, wherever you were on holiday, if something really went wrong, you could end up in prison on health and safety and the rest of it. So I do remember the relief, subtly, of retiring and relaxing into the role as Secretary of the College Youths, which came which is nearly as much a full-time job as the day job.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions? In which case, David, I'd just thank you very much for giving up your time, sharing those very interesting insights, and look forward to seeing you later at the bar.
I do apologise for being late.
No, thank you.